Welcome everybody to the Econ Playground. I'm here with my good friend Neil Simpson. Okay, I've known Neil for a very long time now, and so we thought might as well get to know each other even better by reading together Sun Tzu's On the Art of War. So Neil, how about you tell the audience at home a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dig right in.
Uh, well, I'm by no means like an expert in philosophy or anything, but I have been diving into the genre for the past few months. And The Art of War was actually one of the first books that I read a long time ago, quite a long time ago. Um, and yeah, we just we're getting back into it. Myself, I'm a student at George Mason University, soon to be graduate. I'm a former police officer, so hopefully I can gain some sort of valuable insights from the art of war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, last time I read The Art of War, it was I just read it. I read a huge chunk of it in
Uh-huh.
an Uber. It was something like a $400 Uber because it was from Philadelphia all the way to
$400.
yeah. It was from Philadelphia to DC because I was gonna get on the bus, right? I had bought a bus ticket, and then the bus just got canceled. We were all standing out there. The bus got canceled. So this
How do they
girl,
cancel a bus?
I don't know, or they filled
Like
like
a Greyhound or something like that?
it was a mega bus.
It's a mega bus.
It's like a Greyhound. So yeah, so
Is
it's
there
like
at least Uber Pool?
no, it was I just got on it with six other people that were all
That's an
going to the
Uber
same
Pool.
place. No, but it wasn't an Uber pool. It was an Uber XL.
Oh, did you guys split the bill?
Yeah, we all split the bill.
So how much did you actually end up paying?
I ended up paying like $60.
That's still a fair amount.
Yeah, but it worked. And then I just read The Art of War on my phone.
Okay. All right.
It worked out. It worked out. Oh yeah. So we're just gonna do the first two chapters and sort of sticking our toes in the water here with Sun Tzu. It's a book in my mind. I have it like associated with Trump. Maybe just because he also wrote a book that's similar, but I don't really.
The art of the deal.
The Art of the Deal. Oh, I didn't even. It's called The Art of the Deal.
Yeah, I think that's probably why you associate it.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Maybe we'll read that next. No, I don't think so. I don't
We'll
think so.
see. We'll
I
see.
don't think so.
Open to
Um,
possibilities.
okay, chapter one, laying plans. So the edition that we have is the edition that we got off of Gutenberg.org, which is a great resource for anyone that wants to read any old book. The Gutenberg, they're just putting stuff up there like it's nobody's business. And so it has a lot of sort of editorial comments from the editor, and they're just like little clarifying things about different things that might be lost to us because they're cultural differences or it's a strange interpretation. So um, I think we might even just be able to sort of read through these one by one and talk about anything that we find interesting. Because the way the book is kind of written is it's like these shorter chapters and then these kind of, I think the term for it usually philosophically is like an aphorism, which is just kind of like a statement, like a small but poignant statement, right? So it's not as if like he's like writing a long narrative. He's
Yeah.
just kind of giving you a bunch of nuggets,
Yeah.
you know?
And from what I've read this week, what I've reread and what we've been going over, it looks to be like in some cases very abstract, but in other cases it's so extremely literal that you have to be able to derive your own meanings from it. And I will say that the the editor's comments, I think, in some ways can be helpful, but I don't know how I feel about having the editor's comments like right below each section,
Okay.
because the way I interpret it is as you think about reading a book, and you after you've read a book like a novel or something, you've got an entire schema in your head of how the characters look, how
Hmm.
the designs are, and how the environment looks, and then when you go and see the movie and it's completely different, it's hard to gain your own like understandings and ideas about the writings when there's an explanation right below it. And
Sure.
in this version, there's for literally almost every single uh, like sentence, there's a explanation right below it. So I generally have been trying to avoid those unless I read something and I have a difficult time understanding it, or I find it extremely interesting. Then afterwards, I'll go and read the comment underneath.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens sometimes in philosophy where like some famous, there's like the famous philosopher, right? And then there's a famous interpreter,
Yeah,
right? And then everyone ends up actually listening to the interpreter instead of actually going back to the original source.
yeah,
And then if that interpreter says something dumb, then everyone's like, oh, that original guy was so dumb because nobody's going back and reading it, you know?
yeah.
You actually end up seeing this a lot. So yeah, but then at the same time, it's um
It's a different culture.
it's a different culture, so we kind of need someone to hold
Yeah,
our hand, you know.
yeah,
So okay, let's dig right in. Okay, one. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war then is governed by." Okay, well, let's just talk about those two because that's already a
yeah,
lot, you know. Um, the two questions that I have immediately from that is what exactly is the state, right? Is
yeah.
it like
Okay.
is it like me, the emperor? Is it, like me and my palace and my army? Or is it me, my palace and my army and the city? Or is it me, my palace, the army, the city, and the countryside and the entire countryside that my armies rule over?
I think that the reason that the Art of War, the book itself, is become so popular and so well known and so followed is because the idea is that you're supposed to be able to apply it to anything. So it's obviously when Sun Tzu was writing it, he was like a war general himself. So
Mhm.
he means it in terms of like his armies and stuff, but it can be applied to at least I would hope that I would be able to read it and consider myself the state, or apply it to any aspect of my life. If I am working and I am interacting with a bunch of other officers, maybe they're the state. If I'm working a scene and I'm in charge of them, or maybe it's just me and the aspect of like conflict with another person, whether it's a fight, an argument, a debate, something like that. I think it's like a fluid concept.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now, but I think in different that's true that it can be moved to different things, but this second part makes me wonder if it can be shifted to everything. So it is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. So meaning like if I'm not good at the art of war, I'll die, right? So these questions are unavoidable questions. You have to when you're making strategic decisions, you have to make some decision, right? So
Yeah.
this reminds me of something. I'm going to be making these video lectures on William James essays, right? And that's one facet of a kind of option, or he called it a moral imperative. So sometimes people have these moral questions, right? You can have all kinds of moral questions, right? Is
Yeah.
this right to do this? Is it wrong to do this? There's like an infinite number of them, right? But some of them are imperatives. So you have to answer this question right now for some reason. So not all moral questions are made the same. Some are matters of life and death, right?
Hmm.
Some, if you don't answer them yes or no, then you end up being passive and then just being overrun by whatever the situation is, right? So it makes these questions forced, he would call them, or imperative questions. So that's in one way that you can read what Sun Tzu is saying is the art of war is a forced decision or it's an imperative decision.
That was one thing you said you had a few questions. One of the questions that I thought of immediately was, um, in what situations can you imagine a state that doesn't require knowledge of the art of war?
Hmm.
If without any concept of war, is there a chance of survival for any state, individual, or
Yeah.
or
And
entity?
um, so someone could say, oh, what about Switzerland, right? They're pacifists, right? They haven't been in war in like 500 years, right?
But I would go so far even to say that that isn't isn't the absence of an understanding of the art of war, right? Because to me, the fact that they choose not to engage in conflict is just an example of how they show that they understand the art of war. Because
Yeah.
they choose, by choosing not to do something, you must know that doing it would have some sort of consequence.
Hmm. And if I understand correctly, in Switzerland too, it's not they're pacifists, but it's not like they have no weapons. And actually, like most people there are required to carry a like or to have a gun in their home.
So, what is something that does not, I wouldn't even go so far as to say a country, uh, something that does not understand the art of war whatsoever? Can you think of any examples?
And obviously, art of war, if we're expanding it, it doesn't have to apply just to buildings or to violent kind of conflict.
Yeah,
If this is something that like business leaders read, then they're thinking about like strategy and
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah. And so then I would say even churches think about how they relate to the outside. Churches have enemies in a sense of people that want to stop their mission, right? So
Yeah,
they have to consider that.
I think that that you would be hard pressed to find anything that doesn't deal with in some form, because the way I'm understanding it is some understanding of form of conflict is a subsection of the art of war. So anything that uh, that involves or interacts with conflict at some point or another has some, however minuscule, understanding of the art of war.
Hmm. Yeah, and now I wouldn't say that everything does have an understanding of the art of war, but everything needs to, and anything that doesn't is eliminated.
Yeah, like through. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
And almost everything needs to think about the art of war because everything is in conflict with something else.
That's fair. Yeah,
So as long as there's something that isn't you, you know, there's the potential to be in conflict with it.
yeah.
Okay, but
State of
let's.
nature.
Yeah, well, actually, okay, I've actually been reading some Locke, and I have some other thoughts on state of
Yeah.
nature, but
Okay.
we can talk
Good.
about that later.
Yeah. Good.
Um, okay, so the art of war then is governed by five constant factors to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are: one, the moral law; two, heaven; three, earth; four, the commander; five, method and discipline. So this is kind of what he lays out for the rest of the chapter here is these five different facts of the field, right? These are almost like the givens,
Yeah.
right? Or well, they're not exactly the givens. I take that back because the heaven and earth really feel like they're givens, right?
Yeah.
So, um, but the other ones are kind of a byproduct of the the like what how the army or how the organization is conducting itself.
Yeah.
So I'll I'll just read through the more detailed descriptions of the five factors. The moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by anger. Heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. Earth comprises distances, great and small, danger and security, open ground and narrow passes, the chances of life and death. The commander stands for the virtues of wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. By method and discipline are to be understood the marshaling of the army in its proper subdivisions, the graduations of a rank among the officers, the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army, and the control of military expenditure. These 5 heads should be familiar to every general. He who knows them will be victorious. He who knows them not will fail. So yeah, heaven and earth seem like, oh, it's just like what time of day is it? What is
Yeah,
it?
those
You know?
those are examples of when I said that some of it is like very literal. That's one
Yeah.
of those things that's so literal that you really sometimes have to reach or stretch to find some sort of like wisdom or whatever out of it.
Mm. Well,
Um,
I mean, the wisdom is just the whole thing he's saying here is any general has to be aware of all these things.
yeah,
You can't have been like if Eisenhower was going to do D-Day and he didn't realize that the English Channel was water, you know,
yeah.
he would have failed immediately. So okay, this was my first comment on this. Um, it says in the moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger. So my question was, does their ruler have to be like a person giving orders, or can it be a rule? Can you be ruled? Can you be ruled by a rule? Right? So we all hold like some kind of principle above us. Like if we're equals, right? We hold some kind of principle above us that rules us. So if the moral law is present, then we're all like if the rule is something like I won't steal your stuff, you don't steal my stuff, right?
Like commandments and or like
Yeah, it could be
religious
like
moral laws or something
yeah.
like that.
It
Or,
doesn't need to be like moral law doesn't need to mean like following orders, you know, the
mhm.
way that it almost feels here, but it doesn't have to, I don't think it has to be.
Yeah, I see it a lot as discipline and when you because I like to think about it like I said earlier, and I'm sure I'll say a bunch of times, like in the different forms that this is supposed to be interpreted, not just on a state level, but on an individual level. I interpret that as like your discipline. If you have uh, expressed beliefs or moral rules for yourself, how well are you able uh, to follow them and maintain them? Is how efficient your moral law is.
Well, I don't know if it's just discipline because discipline is a later principle, right? The fifth factor is by method and discipline.
Mm,
So, but then he spells out method and discipline, it's like the organization of the army, and
yeah,
then for some reason stuff about the road. I don't see how those fit. I don't see what the line exactly the difference is,
yeah.
which is true. Discipline might mean something more like, um, oh, what is the word for?
Organization.
Yeah, it might be more like organization. This is okay. This is a great thing about the word organization. When you organize something, when you organize your room, you turn it into like a body with different organs, right?
Like you're talking about different categories, you mean?
Like an organ, all an organ is it's like a category of cells.
Okay, yeah.
So if you have a pile of cells, right? If I say like, oh, I'm made up of 3 trillion cells, that doesn't really describe me, right?
Yeah.
So what is Marcus? Oh, it's 3 trillion cells. That's not true, right? It's 3 trillion organized cells.
You think that defines Marcus? 3 trillion organized cells?
And maybe more,
Yeah.
but
But I'll agree that it's a better start.
Yeah,
instead of
and but
more
just
comprehensive.
that word organize is very biological in a way, you
Okay.
know?
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking a lot through like with biological metaphors, and I maybe we'll get into this somewhere else too. And I'm sure this will keep coming up. So I think you can really think of like the army as like a large body.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. And like not this is it's not even something like, oh, it's just a metaphor. Like really seriously, it's like a large organized body. And then
Uh-huh.
you go, but what is the army? Oh, it's just like, 10,000 men. No, it's 10,000 organized men,
Yeah.
right? Into organs, which are the different battalions that are doing different things.
Yeah.
And as long as they're communicating, somehow they're like the same
Each of
brain.
them is expected to play a vital small piece of a larger role, which like each organ, as you were saying, uh, works together in order to win battles or
Yeah.
wars. Or,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah. And so,
There
yeah.
was something I was going to say because you talked about how the moral law is not discipline, but the fifth rule
Well, no,
is
I mean the word discipline, the way you were describing it, I think that it can describe the moral law, but the word discipline gets used later, and I'm not sure why. Discipline might mean something specific to them, like
it.
disciplined
It
into
might be a
this.
translation thing,
Yeah.
but the way that I interpret where is it? What is the fifth one? Where is that? I'm
It's under
lost.
10.
10. By method and discipline are to be understood the marshaling of the army, its proper subdivisions, graduations, and rank among officers, and etc. But the way that I interpret that, and it could just be um, nothings, but um, I see it more as organization.
Hmm.
And I like to bring everything down to an individual level because I feel like it's easier to understand for me personally if I'm comparing it to myself versus I've never been a leader, a general of an army, so it's easier for me to understand how these concepts relate to me and then apply them to other things. Um, and and the fifth principle, method and discipline, I see that as organization. So that is um, like me being a police officer, my uniform, the way my uniform is. We have this concept in philosophy, or not philosophy, in law enforcement, um, that they used to drill into me in the police academy, and it was called the Jelly Donut Cop. And the idea is that there's two different kinds of cops. There's the kind of cop that gets up in the morning before his shift every day and shaves. He works out. He presses his clothes. He's got his uniform is straight and put together. He's tracking on everything during roll call. He knows what's going on in the community. He knows his powers and abilities, and he knows what he can and can't do, and he's ready to go. And you see that guy, and you can tell that he's ready to go. And then there's the Jelly Donut Cop, and the Jelly Donut Cop is the guy that shaves maybe the night before, and so when he comes into work, he's got a little bit of stubble on his chin. When he's on his way into work, he doesn't go to the gym, but he stops at the gas station and gets himself a jelly donut. And he bites it, and a little bit falls down on his shirt. And he's not fit because he doesn't work out. And so there's jelly donut uh, stains on his shirt. He's got stubble. His shirt's not like tucked in right. His uniform's not right. And and basically, when you're out on the street and you're addressing individuals, and they will think when you're arguing with somebody and they lose control, they're going to see two cops standing in front of them. They're going to see straight edge cop that shaved that morning, and they're going to see jelly donut cop. And they're going to have two options. When they go to attack, they're either going to attack straight edge cop or they're going to attack jelly donut cop. And I've seen like actual like videos of this to back this up.
Hmm.
They're going to attack jelly donut cop because they're going to think that guy's a chump and I can kick his ass. And the fact of the matter is, they're gonna attack him before they attack the straight edge guy. That's all organized and has every little meticulous detail put together, because it's intimidating. It's intimidating to see somebody and know that they're more put together, they know more than you, and they're more prepared for you than you for a fight, or for this conflict that you're um, about to go in with them. So
Yeah, no, that's important. And so would you fit that under um 1 or 5? Would you fit that under moral
I
law, method, and
I
discipline?
put that under 5, because in the description that I see is, by the method and discipline are to be understood the marshaling of the army and its proper subdivisions. Right there, I stop myself and I think, but the marshaling of the army and its proper subdivisions, to me, that screams organization, and to me, that screams straight edge versus jelly donut.
Well, but nobody's like organizing the jelly donut guy. Nobody's saying like, "Oh, you be the jelly donut guy, you be the good guy." They kind of want both of them to be the good guy.
No, but the point is that it's you consider two different armies. There's one army where the
Okay.
method and discipline are
Oh, I
well
see.
attended to, and there's one army where there's not. You're going to attack the army that's not attending to their method and discipline versus
Yeah,
the
I
army that
understand.
is.
I understand. So you're saying the jelly donut cop doesn't organize his own life,
Yeah,
right?
and
Whereas the
that's why he's attacked, because he's seen as weaker,
okay.
seen as unprepared, and that's the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
thing between the two armies.
yeah, yeah. That's good. I definitely agree. Yeah, and so he's literally like not he's not making taking advantage of his own body in a way.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. So let's continue. Therefore, in your deliberations, when seeking to determine the military conditions, let them be made the basis of a comparison, in this wise: 1. Which of the two sovereigns is imbued with the moral law? 2. Which of the two generals has most ability? 3. With whom lie the advantages derived from heaven and earth? 4. On which side is discipline most rigorously enforced? 5. Which army is stronger? 6. On which side are officers and men more highly trained? 7. In which army is there the greater constancy, both in reward and punishment? Yeah, and so that all applies to the example you just gave. You could ask that question about those two cops
yeah,
and then go, obviously. And then the only one that's strange is with whom lie the advantages derived from heaven and earth. And the Deli Donut Cup is kind of given himself disadvantages,
yeah,
or your own like physical strength is the earth in a way, right?
yeah, yeah.
Not taking advantage of it. He didn't see it beforehand, which means it may be too late when the moment comes, right?
Okay, Google, stop. Sorry.
What was that?
I think somebody's hooked up to the Bluetooth, and then Google in here started playing Drake just now. So
Oh, Drake.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
He's cool. Okay. By means of these seven considerations, I can forecast victory or defeat. Great, good stuff. Um, the general that hearkens to my counsel and acts upon it will conquer. Let such a one be retained in command. The general that hearkens not to my counsel nor acts upon it will suffer defeat. Let such a one be dismissed. And if you think about those cops, yeah, who's going to be dismissed from the force, right?
Jelly donut.
Yeah, exactly. While heeding the profit of my counsel, avail yourself also of any helpful circumstances over and beyond the ordinary rules. According as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. That reminds me. So he's basically saying these real situations are going to go, in all kinds of directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I obviously can't tell you everything in this book, right? But it reminds me of something I just read. George Orwell's essay, Politics in the English Language, right? Which is a very interesting it's a very interesting essay. And he ends it with his own rules for writing for people, right?
Okay.
Let me find the rules right now because that just reminded me of that. So okay, 1, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. 2, never use a long word where a short one will do. 3, if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. 4, never use the passive where you can use the active. 5, never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English word equivalent. And then 6, break any of these rules sooner than say anything barbarous, right? And so that last one is what it reminded me of. So Sun Tzu would probably say, like, yeah, take my advice, but if any of it ever like is stupid, like obviously just
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Or if it ever doesn't apply, just it doesn't apply.
Yeah.
But it has to apply to enough situations that it's worth remembering, right?
Yeah. I think that's definitely an important distinction that both of them made, because I can see where that definitely be
Yeah.
hindering.
And I think this is something that one of my professors teaches us a lot too. It's the difference between a maxim and a principle, right?
Hmm.
So a principle is something that always applies in every situation, no matter what, right?
Hmm.
And a maxim is something that applies pretty much all the time, like pretty much, but not always. And we don't
Hmm.
want to claim it applies always. So when are in some situation, the presumption should be on the side of the maxim, right? So
Hmm.
it's almost like a presumption of innocence in a courtroom, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
So the burden of proof is on the side that is an exception to that rule.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
So that's probably true for Orwell's writing rules, and it's true for Sun Tzu's um, war rules. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. 18. All warfare is based on deception. I made a note here. Huh. I guess. Okay, yeah, this is when I started to think maybe he's wrong or there's something weak about what he's saying.
You think it's a big assumption?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a big assumption, but let me continue because I think I changed my mind soon after. Okay, all warfare is based on deception. Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. Hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him. If he is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. If your opponent is of a choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak that he may grow arrogant. If he is taking his ease, give him no rest. If his forces are united, separate them. Attack him where he is unprepared. Appear when you are not expected. These military devices leading to victory must not be divulged beforehand. So, when he first said that, I made a note here and I said, assuming every attack can be blocked, riposted, or counterattacked. But then once he added in number 21, if he is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. And then, before I was saying, oh, well, sometimes someone is just like strictly stronger than you. Like, if an alien comes and like shoots you from space, how can you deceive the alien, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And it seems like evasion, if it's possible, is the count, is the block to every attack,
Yeah.
you know?
But
At least gets them to waste their time.
I thought in a similar manner about how you thought, that in a circumstance of overwhelming force, that the rule or law seems kind of flawed. Um, but I also think about it. I think that what you said is valuable, but I also think you have to consider the other direction. If I have such an overpowering force versus someone else who challenges me, what advantage do I take in feigning weakness if there's no conceivable way that they could overpower me? But I guess, now I'm saying it out loud and I'm thinking about it. Um, if my opponent is applying these laws and using these laws, maybe I think that I'm completely overpowering them, but I don't know that they have some secrets that are useful to them in a battle against me.
Yeah. Obviously, all those things that he said, the other examples of deception that he used are applicable, or they make sense.
Yeah.
You know, pretend to be weak that he may grow arrogant. Um, but I'm not sure. The I think I've
The,
heard that before. This is one of the
the
ones.
only reason my thinking is like that is because there's a passage later on where he notes that he says something to the effect of um, yes, planning and patience are important, but nobody has ever won a battle, or nobody wins battles from making them last as long as possible.
Yeah.
So to me, in a situation where I know that I have an overpowering force against an enemy, what advantage do I have in um, feigning weakness against that enemy?
Hmm.
Because to me, I liken it to, seems like it's just wasting time and wasting my resources possibly.
Whereas you could surrender or something like that, and maybe
Or
save something else.
I don't know about surrender. I'm talking a situation where I'm the alien, as the example you made
Okay.
earlier, where I'm like the alien. What's the point of me pretending not to be strong to the people on Earth when I could zap them?
Yeah. Or yeah. Well, that you might even be pretend to be even stronger than you are. Or if you, because let's say you're an alien, you come, you don't know too much about these humans, right?
Hmm.
Then you don't know if they have the ability to hide or something like that. So you might come looking weak so that they come out of their holes, whatever humans live in, right? And then you can zap them.
Yeah, I think that that is a good thought.
Because the reason that you a part big reason part of the reason that you want to control the information they have about you is because you don't have very much information about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Um, Now the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought. The general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand. Thus do many calculations lead to victory and few calculations to defeat. How much more no calculation at all? It is by attention to this point that I can foresee who is likely to win or lose. Okay, that's pretty simple, and that sums up the chapter.
Yeah.
But the next chapter is chapter 2, Waging War. This one started to get weird. Yeah,
One thing before we move on,
yeah.
this is a little bit off topic, but that passage just reminded me of it. We have another saying in law enforcement, and it goes something to the effect of planning is always absolutely necessary, but almost always absolutely useless.
Okay.
Vice versa. It's something like that. And basically, the idea is um, you can make all the plans you want, but when shit hits the fan, all that's going out the window, and your plans are going to be basically useless. But if you don't have a plan, you can be sure that you'll almost certainly fail in whatever you try to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, this happens even just with like people that want to like hang out. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, we'll just have a great time." I'm like, "Okay, well, what are we gonna do?" And they go, "Well, we'll figure it out." And then sometimes we just don't figure it out.
Yeah.
If you don't plan something before, or sometimes you just need like resources for what you're gonna do. You got to plan ahead for those.
Or I'm sure there's other times when you plan something with people, and then um, you go to execute your plan, and something stops it, something inhibits it. Like you go try to go to the movies, and then you see that the movie theaters are all closed because the coronavirus closed all the movie theaters.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is something nobody knew was gonna happen.
Yeah,
Some people knew, I guess.
exactly. All right.
Um, okay,
Anyway,
we'll continue. Chapter 2, Waging War. Sun Tzu said, in the operations of war, where there are in the field 1,000 swift chariots, as many heavy chariots, and 100,000 mail-clad soldiers, with provisions enough to carry them 1,000 li. The expenditure at home and at the front, including entertainment of guests, small items such as glue and paint, and sums spent on chariots and armor will reach the total of 1,000 ounces of silver per day. Such is the cost of raising an army of 100,000 men. Yeah, and this is something that one of my friends mentioned when he read it a couple years ago. He would just go like, yeah, every once in a while he'll say these like broad things that feel applicable to everything else, and other times he's like, "You're going to need 14 barrels of rice to feed 40 men."
Yeah,
And you go,
yeah.
okay,
That's one of the things that I said too when we
yeah,
started. There's some stuff really abstract and stuff that's like so literal that you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this?
yeah,
Almost.
and then yeah, it's just strange.
But I'm sure that when he was writing it, he didn't anticipate it, or maybe he did, to be a book that was written by people all over the world for the rest of humanity, um, and applied to life as we know it today. You know,
Yeah,
he was writing it for people to gain advantage in war back in his time.
yeah, but these large numbers too, they might be like our version of saying like a bajillion, right? Such is the cost of raising an army of a bajillion men.
When I was listening to Philosophize This one day, and one of the um, writer and speaker of it was reading a passage from somebody, I'm not sure who, but they used an example. They said 40, like 40, they're so old, they're 40 years old. And he said um, that 40 back in times like then was used as a number that was supposed to be so high and so great that let's not even think about or talk about how big the actual number is and just say it's 40.
Just like whenever Jesus uses the word number 77,
Yeah,
because Jesus will say 77 sometimes, and he means like a whole lot.
a lot. It's a
Yeah,
ton.
it's a ton. Okay, when you engage in actual fighting, if victory is long in coming, then men's weapons will grow dull and their ardor will be damped. If you lay siege to a town, you will exhaust your strength. Again, if the campaign is protracted, the resources of the state will not be equal to the strain. Now, when your weapons are dulled, your ardor damped, your strength exhausted, and your treasure spent, other chieftains will spring up to take advantage of your extremity. Then no man, however wise, will be able to avert the consequences that must ensue. Yeah. So that's a case where it's very much like you don't want to put yourself in the position of, you know, zero. You don't want to put yourself in the position of what do you call it? Like no resources, or when you can be absolutely dominated. So
When
if you wear out your whole army,
I think that, but I also think that it's a point to say that, like, especially with the next thing that he says, if you want to just go ahead and read that.
number 5.
Yeah,
Thus, though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been seen associated with long delays. Yeah,
and
that's what you mentioned before too. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm gonna continue making a lot of law enforcement references because that's
No, good.
the
That's
world
good.
that I know, and it's easier for me to understand. Hopefully, it helps others, like viewers and stuff, understand. Um, but there's this thing that happens all the time. It happens almost every single time you're on a call. Um, you can be on a call with however many police officers. There'll be 4 or 5 police officers all on one call for some simple thing like a ticket or something, and there's 4 or 5 cops, and some of them are just standing around. All of a sudden, the supervisor will show up, and as soon as the supervisor gets there, the supervisor's like, "All right, what's everybody doing? What are you guys doing? You're not doing anything? Then leave. If
Yeah.
you're not doing anything, do that. If you're not doing anything, leave." And like they'll break us all up. and tell us all to go do something else. And I think that the point is, if you're not doing something useful, then what are you doing?
That sounds like the method and discipline stuff too.
Yeah. If
He
you're
has to organize them.
if you're not using your time, I think the way I think about it is, if you're not using your time practically or usefully, or your resources practically or usefully, then you're wasting them.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And I think also he's just trying to, like, it seems natural, like, oh, they had a military campaign that lasted 20 years, you know? That doesn't mean it was very good. You could just have
Yeah.
like taken over like one town and it took you a really long time, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that was
Exactly.
the advantage. And then he brings it up later too. I get we'll get to it in a bit. Um, well, I'll just read ahead and then I'll bring it up.
Okay.
There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. It is only one who is thoroughly acquainted with the evils of war that can thoroughly understand the profitable way of carrying it on. The skillful soldier does not raise a second levy, neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. Bring war material with you from home, but forage on the enemy. Thus, the army will have food enough for its needs. And so that reminded me of blitzkrieg tactics,
Okay.
right? Which, are you familiar with that at all?
I'm actually not.
That was the Nazis' strategy right at the beginning of World War II, where they were just like Czechoslovakia and Austria. They just like took these places. They were just like, what is our strategy? Oh, we're just gonna just go in there really, really fast, right? Because they had tanks and stuff. This
Hmm.
is when like tanks and big jeeps and stuff like that was like useful and they could start doing stuff. So they just like rolled right into Austria and they're like, all right, well, you guys are ours now, right? And they did that. Boom, they just did that with Czechoslovakia, and they just did it basically faster than they could prepare, and also so fast that they didn't have to, prolong. They didn't have a long. There was not a long Poland campaign. They took Poland in like a month or two.
Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, well, Leroy Jenkins, that's bad strategy because they lost that fight.
No, but do you know who Leroy Jenkins is?
Oh no, I know. Yeah, I know Leroy Jenkins, but
The World of Warcraft thing, or
yeah,
it's
but that
something like
that
that.
was a lack of discipline, that fight, because they were
I'm not talking about the. I'm talking about the. There's a card, and
in Hearthstone.
no, and something. Hang on. See if I can look it up and send you a picture. You can keep talking while I'm doing this.
No, well, I know who Leroy Jenkins is, but do you know the original video?
No, I
Oh
apparently I
yeah,
don't.
you got to see the original video. Let's play that, honestly.
Okay. Can you
Because
play?
that's
Can
actually
will
very
viewers
well.
be able to see it? Can you like do
Yeah,
a
I
screen
think.
monitor or
Well,
anything?
we'll try this. If it doesn't work for the people at home, it doesn't work. But this is a classic. This is a classic YouTube video. It's here. I'll screen share it. Right.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, guys, these eggs have given us a lot of trouble in the past. Does anybody need anything off this guy, or can we bypass him?
I think Leroy needs something from this guy.
So this is World of Warcraft, right?
Yeah.
And they're doing a raid, which is like a massive, like a 40-player event where everybody's got to get in, and they've all got to like basically coordinate all their attacks. Different people have different roles. There's healers, there's tanks, there's damage people, right? And you're all trying to take out like large groups of very difficult enemies, right? So you've got like a guild leader that leads your guild that's going to go in and do stuff, right? So we'll continue.
Okay.
Oh, he needs those devout shoulders. Isn't he a paladin?
Yeah, but that'll help him heal better. He'll have more mana.
Christ. Okay. Well, what we'll do, I'll run in first, gather up all the eggs so we can kind of just blast them all down with AOE. I will use intimidating shout to kind of scatter them so we don't have to fight a whole bunch of them at once. When my shout's done, I'll need Anthony to come in and drop his shout too, so we can keep them scattered and not to fight too many. When his is done, Bass, of course, need to run in and do the same thing. We're going to need divine intervention on our mages so they can AE, so we can, of course, get them down fast because we're bringing all these guys. I mean, we'll be in trouble if we don't take them down quick.
So you can see this is exactly what Sensu was talking about. You know,
Yeah.
strategy, preparing beforehand. This is like the general who's preparing before battle.
Yeah, of course.
He knows the layout of the land. He knows what over there he wants. He knows whose job is what, right? He's controlling his troops. They all know what's going on.
I think it's a pretty good plan. We should be able to pull it off this time. What do you think, Abdul? Can you give me a number crunch real quick?
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating, of course, percentage of survival.
It's a lot better than we usually do.
All right, thumbs up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jackson! Oh my God, he just ran in. Save him.
Oh, geez, stick to the plan.
Oh, Jesus. Let's go. Stick to the plan, Shove. Stick to the plan. Oh, gee. Oh, fuck. Give me my intervention. Hurry up.
Shall we say I can't cast?
I can't move. My lagging guy can't move. What the hell? I can't move. Oh, my God. Oh, just keep saying more responding. I don't think you can cast with that shit. Oh, my God. We got him. Get off. I got it. Get off. Oh my God.
God damn it, Leroy.
God damn it.
Leroy, you moron. Leroy.
Jimmer.
This is ridiculous.
Don't max. I'm down, fucking down. God damn it. This is before I can die on this. God. Oh, Spiffy, res us.
Why do you do this shit, Leroy?
I'm trying. It's not my fault. Who's Soulstone?
We do have a soul stone up, don't we?
I don't think that's Warlock. Oh, God.
Oh, for...
Great job, for Christ's sake. Leroy, you were just stupid as hell. Over there. At least I have chicken.
So that's the story. The story with Leroy is that he was going out while they were planning to go cook some chicken in the microwave. And then he came back and he didn't realize they were planning. So he just went and charged right in. That's why at the end he says, at least I've got chicken. That's the Leroy story, you know? So Leroy screwed things up in that example, right?
Yeah.
He was
definitely
not following his commander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew. That was good.
That's classic Leroy. So, yeah, and that's a classic YouTube video. Sun Tzu, I'm not sure if like World of Warcraft guild leaders are reading Sun Tzu, but maybe they should get on it. You know?
They definitely should.
Yeah.
Leroy Jenkins definitely is not.
Yeah, but this is what, but this number 9, bring war material with you from home, but forage on the enemy. That's also what one of the Nazi strategies was. So they would feed the army. If you're moving fast enough that the period of time that it takes for you to take an area is the same as whatever the food in that area can feed your army, or the provisions that area can supply your army, then your army will have a continual resupply as you're invading, right? So as long as you up the speed, you don't have to worry about munitions. Or
you gotta also consider, like, the faster that you're doing something, not only the less resources you need, like, altogether. Like you were saying, if it takes an army 20 years to make some sort of conquest, imagine how much resources are wasted in that time span versus if it takes them a year.
Yeah.
How many resources they've used in 20 years, whether without even thinking about the result of any battles, any conflict, the resources at all over the span of time.
Yeah. And
definitely.
I think the reason that he puts that, because that seems obvious, right? But I think the reason that he puts that in there is because there's a tendency to think that the longer, more intricate plans, more carefully laid plans are always going to be better, right? And that would even maybe seem what you would think from reading Sun Tzu, but that's not always the case. You know, so it's kind of this principle is like a check on the other principle, that you should always be prepared. And he goes, but if all you do is prepare nonstop, then you're wasting time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Poverty of the state exchequer causes an army to be maintained by contributions from a distance. Contributing to maintain an army at a distance causes the people to be impoverished. On the other hand, the proximity of an army causes prices to go up, and high prices cause the people's substance to be drained away. When their substance is drained away, the peasantry will be afflicted by heavy exactions. With this loss of substance and exhaustion of strength, the homes of the people will be stripped bare, and 3/10 of their income will be dissipated, while government expenses for broken chariots, worn-out horses, breastplates and helmets, bows and arrows, spears and shields, protective mantlets, draught oxen, and heavy wagons will amount to 4/10 of its total revenue.
Throwing out some very exact fractions
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Precise.
there-
I don't see how you can predict this sort of precise.
Yeah, exactly. Does it say anything in the
Might be making some assumptions here.
Yeah, it doesn't even say. Okay, what does this say? This is a footnote or an editorial note. Tumu and Wang Xi agree that the people are not mulcted. What does mulcted mean? Are not mulcted.
In the notes?
It's what?
Is it in the notes?
No. Wait, I'm gonna Google it. See what this.
Okay.
It's mulcted. Mulcted. Extract money from. Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Are not the people are not mulcted not of 3/10 but of 7/10 of their income. But this is hardly to be extracted from our text. Oshi has a characteristic tag: the people being regarded as the essential part of the state, and food as the people's heaven. Is not right that those in authority should value and be careful of both. Yeah. So I guess he's saying I thought it was interesting that I had never considered something like that. If the army is close to home, then it causes prices to go up. Now, and I'm not exactly sure how their food markets worked, but if it's a totally integrated food market and the government is buying food from the people, then I guess it would cause prices to go up. But I'm not even in a simpler sense, if the government is just taking food from people, right? I guess if they're taxing food too, the price is going to go up. So basically they're saying if you're feeding the army, you're taking those resources from someone else, right? So you've got to be sensitive to that. You don't want to just drain your whole people's resources just to feed the army,
Yeah.
That's pretty and if you're not sensitive to that, then you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
Okay. 15. Hence, a wise general makes a point of foraging on the enemy. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own, and likewise a single picul of his provender is equivalent to 20 from one's own store. I don't understand this one at all.
The way that I read it, and I could be reaching here. I read it as when he says that a cart of your own, or a cart of your enemy is worth 20 of your own. Is that not only do I now? So if we're both starving, right, and you and I are enemies, and if we don't eat soon, we'll die. And you have an apple. If I take that apple from you, I not only have an apple now, I have the sustenance I need. You're my enemy. You no longer have what you need. So it's better for me to take something from you than to have something of my own, because I benefit twice. It's a win-win for me. I've hurt you and helped me in the same instance.
Sure. And then taking 20 cartloads from your own thing means you're taking it from someone else in your own.
Yeah.
Somehow. But then it says here in the editorial note, because 20 cartloads will be consumed in the process of transporting 1 cartload to the front. Which, what?
Oh, yeah, I read that too, and that I think is like we were talking about earlier, wasting resources.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for the food to get to the soldiers at the front line, if you're saying that it has to come from your cities and markets at home,
yes.
You have to have somebody who's going to transport it. Those people who are going to transport it are going to need food for their journey and time to transport to the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna yeah, I can see what he's saying. You're wasting
Yeah.
more resources by drawing from your own as opposed to getting stuff instantaneously from your
Yeah.
enemy.
It's actually in a way the same point. That when you're taking from someone else, it's almost like there is a cost to doing that, right? The cost of whatever difficulties it is to take, but there's a extra sort of bonus on top of that, and that you don't need to produce it.
Yeah.
That's what's so great about stealing, right?
Yeah.
That you get the thing pretty much like that.
I'm not gonna condone stealing
Yeah.
on here, but
Yeah,
I
but
see what you're
it
saying.
makes sense, right? If you're so like if you think of it in terms of like political stuff, right? It's better to take, like, if I'm a political candidate, you're another political candidate, it's better for me to take one of your supporters
Than to gain a supporter.
than to like have two of my supporters have a kid and raise it to support me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then they have to
Yeah.
spend more time doing that.
Exactly.
Okay.
But he's talking about in a more literal sense that you're wasting resources by like think about it like exponentially. Like you're not, if I want one apple, if I'm on the front lines and I need one apple for me, it's going to take 10 apples for that apple to get to me because the person who's transporting it to me they need apples. And I don't know why I'm using apples as my example, but
I think war is not a productive resource. So war is not very productive.
well, unless you gain enough from your enemies that you're
like, but in the moment, just like sitting there fighting does not produce anything for you directly.
No.
So
Yeah.
it has to be a drain on something else. Okay, we'll continue. I don't think there's too much left.
No, we're almost there.
Now, in order to kill the enemy, our men must be roused to anger. That there may be advantage from defeating the enemy, they must have their rewards. Therefore, in chariot fighting, when 10 or more chariots have been taken, those should be rewarded who took the first. Our own flags should be substituted for those of the enemy, and the chariots mingled and used in conjunction with ours. The captured soldiers should be kindly treated and kept. This is called using the conquered foe to augment one's own strength. In war, then, let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. Thus it may be known that the leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or peril. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's I guess two different ideas there. Which one I think is a byproduct of that first factor, the moral law, in that in order to get your soldiers to follow you, they're going to have to get something out of this, right?
Yeah. I think it creates this sense of loyalty and also a sense of purpose and motivation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Because you think about it, if they're not, if your soldiers, they go and fight the battle, what is their motivation for fighting harder while they're already fighting the battle besides their own survival? If they can walk around and not have to fight anybody and not have to interact with anybody, what's their motivation for going to the front line and killing a dozen people and putting their own life at risk if nobody's going to acknowledge that? Why would they do it?
Yeah, I mean,
so he's saying
if they're so dedicated for some other reason, then they are. But he's saying I would say don't depend on that, right?
Yeah.
And then 19, I think, is one of the best ones. In war, let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. So if I'm thinking in terms of my research, if I'm like, oh, I spent years on this paper, it doesn't really matter how long I spent on it,
Mm-hmm.
I should make sure I get what I need and I go for it,
Yeah.
Get right for the source. That's what's important. And then this last one is, I made it just a small note that it's the leader of the armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or peril. And so he's not exactly like glorifying of war. He's not like war is this great thing where everything goes.
Oh no, definitely not. No.
Yeah, he's just like, this is, you've got to practice this art, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Definitely.
obviously
I don't
going to be
think
important.
in any sense that Sun Tzu was some sort of conqueror by like desire, or just by gain. He wanted to conquer as much as he possibly could. I think he saw this as like, you need to know these things
Yeah.
to survive, and you need to be good at it. And if you're the best at it, then you'll survive um, with ease. Maybe not with ease, but easier.
Yeah. And so that's what makes it interesting, and that's what makes it relevant. Yeah, and then I'm just thinking, like, is this going to get me better at board games? That's kind of what I want to get out of this, you know?
If you really apply the principles, it might.
Yeah. Usually, I don't focus on victory. Usually, I focus on like cleaning up things, making sure everything looks good. But then I
Uh,
realize, but then you like miss like crucial points.
I do that in games sometimes.
Yeah.
So preoccupied with um, growing your force that you're not taking advantage of opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like. If I've been playing this strategy battle game, like a Lord of the Rings real-time strategy battle game, Battle for Middle Earth 2, right? And I'm always just like, I just want to build a sick base, and then they just attack me while I'm weak, you know?
Yeah,
So, and I never attack them, but I got to start attacking.
yeah. You got to start attacking them.
I got to start attacking these orcs.
And you got to start utilizing their resources.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'll do that.
All right.
Okay. And we'll end
But don't
here.
Leroy Jenkins though.
Yeah, don't Leroy. Yeah, definitely don't Leroy Jenkins. That was so poignant. That was such a good example. People should bring that up more. Okay. All right. Well, we'll end here, and we'll see you guys a couple weeks or so, probably.
All right.
All right. See ya. Bye bye.